content.
You cannot judge that system the same way. Why? Because there is no choice for the individual there. If he tries to give you a food, it will automatically be turned into poison. If I try and hug you, I'll end up giving you a choke and I'll be killing you. There is no way to make a good choice. So there's no such thing in there. So the only system in which you can have moral judgment of a creature is if that system in which that creature is has both good and evil within it.
Yeah, I agree with this.
And the way to think about it is, if I have a blackboard and I get a black chalk and I make a line, will you see the line?
You would.
If I have a blackboard and a black...
Oh no, you won't see anything. You won't see anything.
But I need the black to make the white line seen. So you need the good to make the evil apparent.
Contrast for the two.
Absolutely, and you need the evil to make the good apparent.
And what's interesting about that is this dichotomy seems to be necessary to see the whole.
Absolutely.
We're living in a very paradoxical world.
They cannot be good without evil. They cannot be nice without.
Because there's nothing to measure against.
Yeah.
Nothing to measure.
You know, brother, fundamentally though, these very deep philosophical questions, I'm not saying that they're fruitless, but what I'm saying is that, you know, a child, a 2-year-old, that sees a ball land in front of it, looks over its shoulder to see where the ball came from. It's intrinsic within that child. Nobody taught the child. So when Allah says in the Quran, did this universe give birth to itself? It's asking the child, where did the ball come from? You see my point?
It sounds a lot easier when you put it that way. Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
And so the universe came into existence. We know it came into existence. If it didn't and something else physical brought it in, then it must have come into existence. And if that was not the first cause, then there must have been something that brought it into existence. Ultimately, Allah is telling you, use your brain, man. Why can you not see that all of this has come from something? You understand? And just as the child doesn't need a reminder, the fitrah does not need the reminder, but you just need to uncloud the fitrah.
Yes.
And then you see where the ball has come from.
Because I feel it's coming from somewhere, but I don't know where it's coming from. Like
So let's take that and assume it's right? That we see something and we infer the cause. It's still an inference, right? And it's an inference about an entity that's not human, right? It's God, right? So we're applying the rules that apply to this universe upon God. That might not be the case. You know what I mean? If you throw a ball, it has to have someone throwing it. But if the universe is a creation, does it need to have a creator? I'm not sure the same rules would apply. That wasn't actually the point I wanted to make.
If the universe has a creator, is a creation, does it need a creator? Yes,
I remember it now. Okay, let's say that that's the case. This is what I actually wanted to say. That doesn't actually tell you anything about the nature of that God.
Yeah,
I agree.
So the later
we agree.
knowledge about what this God might be and want and etc. maybe is less certain.
So remember, just to that's a really good point. That knowing that there's a creator doesn't give you information about the creator itself. How will we find out about the creator? For us.
Well, you find out through the Quran and Hadith.
So what is this? So the only way we can know is if the creator tells us. I can't find out something about the creator who is outside of the universe. Something that the creator doesn't tell me. I have no access to get that information. So remember I mentioned 124,000 prophets have come across the world. So this is the creator telling mankind
about himself, about the creator.
Okay, now I'm getting confused. I thought he was telling us about ourselves through the fitrah.
So the fitrah is our internal understanding and acceptance that there is a creator.
There is a creator.
But this doesn't tell you about the creator.
It doesn't tell you.
So it's like there's a car, but you don't know if it's a BMW, how big the engine is.
I see what you mean. Makes sense. That's why you make the prophets.
So the details about it, absolutely. So if you look back in history, and I mentioned that all these different cultures and societies and religions had a concept of an ultimate creator. So we have people separated by time, by space, so geography, by culture, by language, who've all come and said that there is a creator, he is one, and this is what he's asking me to do. All of them are separate. So we have to account for this. How does this How can this be? And one way of accounting for it, from a Muslim perspective, is that all these different data points, separated by time and geography and culture and language, all point towards the same place, which is there must be a creator. So if you take the common points of all of this, an ultimate being communicated with human beings to tell them how to live in the world, we get a part of the message. Then you have to look at what's currently available from the messages, the claimants. Christians say they have the message from God. Muslims say they have the message from God. Buddhists might say, well, Buddhists don't believe in a God, so they say, but other people may say that. Then what's incumbent upon us is, okay, let's see what these messages are saying, and is there anything within the message that I can use to affirm that this is a preserved message from the being from the person that gave the message, that can tell me information that I can then say this is reliable enough for me to say the creator has said about this about himself, and this is what the creator is like.
I have to make
so this
sure.
Is your analysis.
Yeah, that's my analysis. But I understand. I just don't want to fall into the trap of becoming a pick and mix.
No, absolutely.
Where I'm going to start picking what works for me. So I can only hope that when I'm searching and I'm doing that analysis, that the truth will then be revealed to me, and then I will know the origin.
Absolutely.
But I do fear from the discussion. I don't want to be in.
Let me introduce another point for you, maybe to confuse you more.
Well, I was curious though, because it's obvious what my point of view is. What is your point of view though?
What do you mean?
Because my point of view is to reach the end.
Oh,
And that's why I'm talking to people of different belief systems. Because I generally believe that there is a truth in what the Muslims tell me, what Christians might say, what Buddhists might say, and I want to find the truth. So I want to end it. Do you want to end it?
I think the truth is of human in this form, this consciousness that we have. I think it's not going to help you. This is to search, is to be the searching force, the understanding force of the universe. Because that's what we do, right? We question, we travel, we understand, we philosophize, we think, we puzzle. For me, that is part of our. That's the essence of our being.
Question in reference to what
sure,
you just said?
Of course.
I agree with you about the importance of searching. But let me put to you, if there is a truth out there, would it not be better to not be in an eternal search, but to arrive at a conclusion of finding that truth? Would you not accept that?
Okay, my response to that line of argumentation, that logical point is, I'm not sure if I could ever get to the state of understanding.
That's not what I've asked you.
I've not answered your question yet. Okay. I'm saying that for me personally, because you're asking me, I don't think I can get to the point where I could say that I was sure. I don't think I would be honest. I'd have to be 100% sure, or I wouldn't want to say it. You understand?
But have you looked at the evidence for the claims that are being made by the Muslim, by the Christian, by the Jew? So what do you find in Islam, for example, that actually takes you away from being convinced or rejecting it?
There's a major point. There's a number, but this is not something that I don't spend much of my time these days thinking about the religious argumentation. I go more on the metaphysical, philosophical side, separate from doctrine, but I'll try and answer that. This one. The message of God is given to man, right? And it tells us how to live in accordance to the will of God, right? What God wants for us so that we can go to heaven instead of hell. One of my major contentions that makes me question its validity is this. It would be possible for the God to put that guidance into your being. Why does it need to be revealed through a prophet? Why does it need to be revealed through a book? For if it's the all-powerful God, it could put it in you. You could say, well, I could choose to follow the path of God, or I can choose my own selfish path. And it's there. There's no translation, there's no misunderstanding, there's no interpretation, there's no sects. That's the clearest move I have. It's a heavy blow, that one, but that's my honest answer.
Can I say that I appreciate your sincerity? Because you gave a very sincere answer. Now, the idea, I just want to pick up on this idea of, well, why not just give us the information that we need? Why not just give us that belief? But we were talking about a moral agency and free will. So we're told in the Quran that if I had willed, I would have made them all believe. So we're told this in the Quran, that if I had wanted, I could have made everyone a believer. And this is in the context of telling the Prophet that we cannot force people to believe. You can't do it. Because if I had wanted to, I could have made everyone believe. It's a choice, ultimately.
I asked that about 30 minutes ago.
Sure.
Why didn't he just feature and make us just start
He
working?
thought it was a good idea, and then he thought, I'll bring it in later.
My key point there is that it would still be a choice. You would have all the information without needing to understand Arabic, for example, to get the true Quran. You would have it within you. That's my contention. You would still have a choice.
So I understand. So what you're removing actually from this scenario, you're removing any idea of a real, in the sense that if you're standing in the road and you see a car coming towards you, you can see the car and it's coming towards you. You're left with two simple things: step out of the way or stay in the road. Right? The choice is not to believe in the car coming or not coming. The choice isn't to believe that this is the road or not the road. So what you've done is you've taken away aspects of the decision to where it's only acceptance or refusal.
It's more honest.
I appreciate
It's certain.
It's easier. It's easier. It's easier. But the point here is that, you know, there's a verse in the Quran and it says this. And they ask you for signs. Tell them, have I not shown you enough? So I believe that this thing that you're talking about, make it clear for us. We're in that place. I think it's clear. You come from a biological background. Well, biology background, not biological background. All biological.
Hopefully, yeah.
You're not an alien. Okay.
If you look around, I mean, biology is amazing. Especially when you get into biochemistry and you get into the nuances of what's happening even in organelles.
It's very complex.
Absolutely complex.
And then there's quantum physics behind
Because
it all.
Absolutely. This world is amazing. There's no way I could ever, for me personally, forget the scientific arguments or philosophical arguments. From my fitra perspective, this is never going to be a mistake, an accident, a hapstance.
Okay.
It's never going to be that. And so for me, when I speak with people who sort of, I'm not sure, look around. And there's a verse in the Quran also, just another verse in the Quran that says that I will show them signs in the horizons within themselves until the truth is manifest and they know this is from the Creator. So we have our signs, we have our information, we have our pointers, and it's all around us. But it's a choice that's required for us to make. And you're given sort of a blank slate almost. The picture is there, and then you're given, be in the world, look around, and you come to your conclusion. I mean, have you read the Quran at all, William?
I read about 60 pages of it.
Really?
Yeah. From the start, 60 pages from the
60
start
pages.
to wherever that goes. Yeah.
No, have you read the Quran?
I've never finished it. I've been reading it, but then I get distracted by looking at the Sharia.
Have you got copies of it? I'll give you some copies.
I've got one. Because I get distracted.
Can I
with
just
the-
touch on your point as well, what you said, in terms of why did God not just instill this information in us, program us, you know? You know, it's interesting, but humanity should not deny the existence of the Creator based upon how the Creator decided to give that information to humanity. You understand my point?
I understand.
So I don't deny God because He did something this way. That's a very arrogant, not to sort of attack you in any way, but I'm just saying generally I think it's a very arrogant stance to say, well, why didn't God just do it this way? Then I would have accepted. You know, why did God? And surprisingly, throughout history, we find this same trait in humanity with all of the prophets and how they interacted with those prophets. So, for example, when the Jews were told to sacrifice the cow, there's a story in the Quran. They said, make it plain to us. What type of cow should it be? And then they were given, Musa alayhi salam, Moses gave them what type of cow it should be. Then they said, oh, we are confused. You know, tell us whether it should be young or it should be old, or what color it should be. Eventually, Allah gives them the specifics of what color the cow should be, that it should not have soiled the pastures, etc., etc., etc. Then finally, they say, you've made it plain to us. But there was only one cow in the entire area that was left. That was the description of that cow. So the woman who owned the cow decided, I'm going to ask for a hefty price now, because now I know what you want. So when they finally sacrifice it, Allah says, they did not sacrifice it willingly with good heart. So these endless questions of why did God do it this way? Why not that way? This does not agree with me. I personally think.
Do you not think it's reasonable what I said? I think it's very reasonable.
I think what is more reasonable is to first assess whether a creator exists or doesn't exist. And so when you say to me that just because we see a consistent rule through the universe of this contingency, of dependency, and that why should we apply this rule on the universe itself, I would argue the flip argument, which is that why shouldn't you? When in science, if I boil water and it boils at 100 degrees centigrade, and I perform the experiment 1,000 times and it boils at 100 degrees centigrade, is it not reasonable for me to then assume that water will generally, if it's the same water, will boil at 100 degrees centigrade? But the person who says, no, the universe could have just come from nothing, is telling you, I know you've done the experiment 1,000,000 times and it's always boiled at 100 degrees centigrade, but it could boil at 105. You understand my point? I'm not saying that is necessarily evidentially provable that God exists, but I'm saying, is it a reasonable assumption to make? And I would say it's a very reasonable assumption to make.
I would say it's reasonable, but then maybe we're all biased.
Yes, but you could argue that, but you're not Muslim.
No.
You're not a person of religion. You've arrived at the same conclusion, that it's quite reasonable. And this is what I say to people who are atheists, that my stance of saying that the universe is contingent and that it needs an explanation, and one of those explanations is a rational explanation, which is that something uncaused brought this universe into existence.
Can I raise a point?
In contingency, is that an unreasonable argument to make? And I don't feel that it's an unreasonable one.
Okay, so if we accept that the idea that it's created by a creator God, right? Is it also reasonable to assume its motivation?
Motivation?
Well, why? Why did it create everything? Because you could say, well, okay, it's logical that a creator created something. You could say that.
Very good question.
And then you say, well, we're still inferring the motivation of God given to us allegedly by prophets and visions and books and such, which are human products. They're coming, maybe they're said to be came from angels and such, but they're still going through the medium of human, which I don't feel is a necessity for an all-powerful being. You should be able to send it straight to you. But that's my previous point. So, like that, because the meaning could be simply created it for, how could we possibly know the motivations of God? But for fun, because it's what it does, because it creates infinite universes all the time. It's a difficult one.
But doesn't that clash with what Brother Abbas was saying, that instead of us constantly fixating on the hows and the why, shouldn't we first concentrate on understanding and acknowledging God's existence first?
Well, I already did. I said, okay, God exists.
Okay,
but
so
then
you do accept
why?
it.
Well, I'm not saying that's. I'm not saying that's. Yeah, to explore the hypothetical. I'm saying it's created it, and we're saying it created it because da da da. How can we know that?
So this is the same point that I made maybe a couple of points back, that we've had 124,000 prophets who came into the world, separated by time, culture, geography, language. We've all said the same thing, that there is a creator being who has communicated with us, and this is what he's asked us to do. They've brought different texts over time. If you look at the general texts, there are common threads we find. The God is one, He wants you to worship Him alone without partners, which is the basic message throughout all of the systems. And if you want to know about our purpose, then that's the place to look. But if before you do that, you to verify that information. Is this reliable? Is it preserved? Is it from the person who made the claim?
Is it possible to be reliable about such ancient stories? I would say no.
Do you think so?
Yeah, unfortunately, to take them as literal truth. But my perspective on old mythological stories are that they have a purpose. They have a purpose to guide us in life. But for me, it doesn't mean that they are true in the true sense. There's a being of God, but the meaning of them in your life can be true. Like it'll help you live well. That's what I mean.
Which ties in the whole Quran. Is it literal, or there's some parts which are allegories?
Yeah, there are some parts which are. So the Quran says there are some verses, and the Quran says this itself. We have revealed some verses which are clear, unambiguous, and there are some which are ambiguous. The people with bad intention in their hearts, and I'm paraphrasing, they will focus on the ambiguous and they will misguide themselves. So the things that are clear. The Lord is one, worship Him alone without partners. They're all the things that we need to know to get.
What are the things that Allah touches on in the Quran? Quran chapter 40 verse 57. Allah said, indeed the creation of the heavens and the earth is greater than the creation of mankind, but most of mankind do not realize it. Allah mentions this not realizing it, not appreciating it, not understanding it many, many times to let the human being realize that your faculty to reason and understand is very limited. So, see, for example, as I was explaining to you, when I see the surgeon cutting open the woman, if I just see that, my perception of the surgeon and what he's just performed is going to be shaded in relation to my ignorance of what was happening, right? But if it's made clear to you that this is what is behind it, your perception completely changes. Now, we believe as Muslims, there are many things that haven't been made apparent to us in their entirety. However, we believe that what is essential for us to attain God's forgiveness and His paradise has been given to us. So this concept of analysis and analyzing God could, quite frankly, be an endless task. So even if, for example, your notion of why did God not just send this down, if it was answered, let's say, categorically, this is why we didn't do this, you would find something else.
That's scary.
And if that was answered, you would find something else.
I wouldn't want to be that kind of person.
And what Allah says in the Quran, in chapter 18, Surah Kahf, it's verse, I think, 50, that, if I can get it up actually, it'd probably be better. Surah Kahf, chapter 50, that mankind basically, they falsify God's signs by using falsehood. So using confusion, conjecture.
I hope you're not meaning my questions, because I'm trying to be intellectually honest.
No, not at all, brother.
Okay.
Honestly, I'm not trying to say that. But generally, what I'm trying to say to you is that even often when questions are answered quite explicitly, people find some other reason. That, okay, why was it Muhammad? Why Arabic? Why not English? I've heard people ask me this question. When I've answered that question, they've said to me, okay, but why just for the Arabs? And I say, when I answer that question, they say, okay, but why not today? Because we could have televised it and everyone would have seen. You understand my point?
But that doesn't work, because they didn't listen properly. Well, if they spoke to you, because you mentioned this more than once, there were 124,000 prophets, different parts of the world.
Right.
So everybody seems got the message.
Yes.
So it wasn't just in Arabic.
And Allah says in the Quran that we never punish a people until we have sent them a warner. In other words, a messenger.
I have a question.
So when He sends them a messenger and he gives them that this is what Allah wants you to do, and they come with signs and miracles to convince the people that I am indeed from God, and then if while accepting that message they transgress and they go against what Allah has told them to do, then for them can be punishment. Allah can ordain punishment for them.
So there's a number of questions. Let's go with a different one. I had a question I wanted to ask at the beginning, which is more general. It's not religiously based, although your answer will probably come from religion. In my analysis of human action and things happening in the world and things happening in human history, it seems to me that negative action, that destructive action, that potentially evil, potentially malevolent, seems to be the easiest choice of man. And I'm puzzled. That's something I'm struggling with understanding. You know what I mean? I'm saying.
Give me an example.
I'll try. I'll just read a bit more. Is that to do the negative, to do the hateful, to do the vengeance, the anger, the destruction, the like sadism kind of idea, is so common, so prevalent, and seems to be the first course of action somehow. I wonder why. Why is it so difficult to do the good, to do the selfless, to do the benevolent action that's self-sacrificial? Why does it doesn't seem to be a balanced dichotomy? It seems to be like that. Like the noble action is so hard and the difficult action so easy, and that's something I'm thinking about, because like I said, I've had other intimations about the nature of reality and it's still difficult.
I would humbly disagree with you.
Okay.
Let's take. There's a lot of trauma happening in the world today. Let's have a look at that trauma. So we've got wars happening in most of the Middle East. We have wars happening in parts of Africa. If you look at what's happening in China, wars everywhere. These are prominent pieces of information that we're bombarded with all the time. So what happens to us is it skews our perception of the reality. And the reality is there's about 8 billion people on the planet. And if you look at the proportion of people involved in the harm, killing, murdering, the wars, as a proportion...
I can be more specific,
please.
because your answer is fine, but I have a more specific, nuanced... It's more psychological, right? It's like this. When I say this negative action, I mean the urge, the desire, when you're in the tube and you see somebody that needs a seat and you don't give them a seat because you're like, oh, fuck it. That. Why is that the easiest thing? You understand me? That's just a sort of a stupid example, but that's what I mean. I mean, it's that undercurrent of tension within man that seems to me that pulls more negative. It doesn't mean murder and destruction, but it means the kind of willingness to do it.
I'm a Christian. If you allowed me, I can
look, the thing is this, yeah? There's a story of the indigenous Indian, Red Indian, American, whose son says to him, he says to the son, that son, there are two wolves that reside inside of you. And he says, Father, which one is the stronger one? And he said, the one that you feed the most. Right?
Do you know the second part?
No, hold on a second. Within Islam, we have this concept that when the matter is settled after the Day of Judgment, that Satan will be brought in front of the people. And Satan will say to the people, I only called you, I did not make you do what you did, and you responded. I didn't make you do these things. I simply attracted you, allured you. I called you to do these bad things, and you responded. I made you a promise, and Allah made you a promise. And my promise was deception and lies, whilst the promise of Allah was the truth. So we believe this concept.
But my point was, maybe it's just my perception. Maybe it's my personal perception that it feels easier to do the negative.
Let me respond to that more directly. So I think we were talking about the fitrah before, natural inclination, that it gives you the idea that there is a creator, and it gives you somewhat of a moral compass. We mentioned about now. And we mentioned that the society can cloud this. The society that you're in can cloud this moral compass as well. And what we find is that if you went back a few generations, this easiness with which bad is done or evil is done is probably less. So, and when I see my child, for example, when they're very young, even now, I've got children of varying ages, but I don't see this inherent being bad within them. I don't see this at all. What I do see is that as they get older, they interact with maybe other people, and then they learn to be wily in the world. They learn how to cope with other people who may be like this towards them. And so this is a learned characteristic. So this is a clouding of the fitrah. And what we do with our what we do with our teaching and raising our kids is we're trying to put into their hearts and to keep their fitrah unclouded. This is how we interact. When you see that elderly woman come on the bus, you need to give her your seat. When you see something bad happening, you need to try and help it. So this is all about the fitrah unclouding and unclouding. Now, for me, my personal experience, because it's really coming from your personal experience.
Well, it's all we have.
And we have. So
and that's another point I'll get to about God.
For me, my personal experience is the opposite. I've often, to my own detriment, I've done things for others because I think it's the right thing to do. And I don't know why that is. I'm not someone special or anything at all. It's just maybe there was something that my parents sort of honed into me and put into me a lot, and it's sticking there. And my fitrah in that aspect is not clouded. And I think if you went to most people,
I will disagree with you fundamentally.
Sure.
No, I don't think it's that simple, man. The human psychology is very complex. We're full of demons in our mind
we are.
from our ancient ancestors. Maybe you don't follow the path of evolution, but for me, it's quite clear. I didn't want to interrupt you so violently, but like, I don't think that's right. I don't think we can go. If you ask everyone, they'll say that they're good, but they know that they're not. Like,
I'm saying my personal experience has not been the same as yours.
Right. Well, okay, fair. But it seems you read a little bit of history, and all you see is terror.
Because that's what history records. History is not going to record the person who got up from the bus to give the lady the seat.
That's right.
Even though the vast majority of people who are, if you took the people who are doing evil and took the people who are doing good in the world, which is my earlier point, the people who are actively involved in doing harm, far less in number than the people who are actually living their lives and being good fellow human beings.
So to dispute that, we can take the example of a mass ideology making an entire populace move towards the evil. And those people that aren't, like, let's take the classic example, let's take the Nazi concentration camps or the Soviet gulags that nobody talks about, right? Those happened not just because of one or two people instituting it, it's an act of evil by omission. By all the people who didn't stand against it. So that's hundreds of millions of people.
Look, you've read a bit about psychology as well, I'm assuming.
Oh, I'm trying.
So have you read The Banality of Evil, Philip Zaragoza?
No, I haven't read that.
So he carried out the experiments in America where they put the two groups of students, some were prisoners and some were...
Stanford? No, or was it Milgram? I can't remember. Stanford.
Milgram, yeah. So he wrote about this, and he talks about the same thing.
Yep.
And he talks about how easily we are influenced.
Yeah.
And this is about influence. So in a pack, and I'm using the word pack specifically because it has negative connotations, human beings will react differently to somebody than if they were individual.
That's right.
So you and me speaking together in this way will be fine. If you put 20 of your friends with you, you will start to follow a herd mentality.
It's the mob mentality.
Mob rule. That's right. And it overrides your individual morality to a certain extent.
Yes.
So you absolutely is complex. This is a complex scenario. What's the right thing to do? What's the verse in the Quran you often quote about justice? So listen to this verse.
So this verse of the Quran was selected by Harvard University as one of the three most profound verses of legal jurisprudence, justice. And they selected this verse, and it says, "O ye who believe, stand up as witnesses to Allah in justice, even against yourselves, against your parents, or against your kin, whether one is rich or poor." Now, a profound statement in the 7th century. O ye who believe, stand up as witnesses to Allah, even against yourselves, against your parents, or against your kin, whether one is rich or poor. And so we have practical examples of the Prophet ﷺ where a dispute is brought to him of a Jew and a Muslim, and he sides with the Jew, telling the Muslim that you're wrong and give him what he's due. This concept of justice and concept of fairness is something that's ingrained within us as a absolute compulsory act. If we don't do it, it's regarded as a serious sin, to the extent that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that a dhimmi, a non-Muslim, living in the land of a Muslim under the protection of the Muslim with a treaty, if he's treated unjustly, on the day of judgment, I will be his advocate against you.
So what the point of, thank you, Jazakallah, the point of quoting that verse was, we are told to fight these urges. We're taught and this is what I was saying before, that our morality and our way that we interact with human beings is beyond the society. We can't let society determine what is right and what is wrong and how we should behave. So this is why, as a creature with understanding of morality and a human being, what we need to have absolute morality, our morality has to come from a place that is not us, which is really a strong argument for the existence. So I believe that.
I don't think it has any evidence, so that's the problem.
I understand what you're saying, but
Like the objective.
the point that I'm making is that the very urges you're talking about that make us change our morality in terms of pressure, we're being told that you must fight these.
I agree.
They're going to come and you have to resist this urge.
And also,
need to have that.
Yeah, we'll find
and also Allah gives us, and this is the whole point of messengers and revelation, because where you say that we have these urges, Allah is telling us in the Quran, let's go back to that verse, Allah is telling us in the Quran how to fight those urges.
Yeah.
Do you understand my point? And so that particular verse was worship Allah worship Allah so you can. It's okay, it doesn't matter. It's about guarding yourself from evil, from these evil urges.
Yeah.
And so you're quite right. Look, as a Muslim, I might look at somebody sitting next to me who has fallen asleep with an expensive diamond ring that has fallen off their finger. I may look at that and think, my God, that's a big diamond. There's no cameras here. And this woman, she's super rich. If we had lost, she'd get insurance money. I could find a way to justify taking the ring. But the only thing that would stop me, I would hope, inshallah, is that there are no cameras here, but there is the ultimate camera up there, and that you are accountable.
But let me raise a point. If I'm in a situation, if I would be in a similar situation to as he described, which we all have been in, not necessarily with stealing something, but a situation where we feel the call of morality. We feel it. We feel, like I was saying to you, we feel the conscience. Ken? You can call it that. So as well, the conscience. You have that feeling, and you'll judge yourself. And some people that judgment seems to not affect some people for some reason, maybe sociopaths and such. But for the general populace, it is a real effect. You judge yourself upon it. Now, what I can say is that happens to me. I don't subscribe to your system, but it still happens to me, and I don't want to do an immoral action if I can help it, right? Not because I'll be punished or rewarded, but because of that inner feeling.
But we believe that even the person who doesn't receive the message of Islam still has this innate fitrah in him. So the explanation to that is that if you were to do many horrible things and then die, and then God questioned you, why did you do them? You cannot excuse switching off your fitrah. Because Allah says, but hold on a second. I gave you the means to decipher that which was good from that which was bad, even if you weren't taught it. That's my point. In America,
I've spoken to
in America,
so I know about the fitrah.
Right.
And I've spoken to Christians, so I don't have
it's
any
very
experience.
interesting. In America, they had a blackout in New York. I think they wrote many articles and books about this blackout, right? And what they found was perfectly moral, good people.
So they think. So they think.
Well, exactly.
That's my point about psychology.
But I agree with you. But to argue in definitive terms that all of these were bad and evil people and didn't suddenly switch off that fitrah because the opportunity came that was such a golden, one in a lifetime opportunity that they thought, you know what, sorry, I'm switching it off for a few seconds. And they found that Mercedes and expensive vehicles were pulling up outside jewellery stores and robbing them. And the poor person was outside the supermarkets stealing loaf of bread. So everyone has a price. Everybody has a level of temptation beyond which, So for example, I'll give you an example. I'm not saying Muslims are noble and good people, and clearly there are good and there are bad everywhere.
I think we're all both.
I totally agree with you. I think what religion does and what God does, however, is this. No matter how good the opportunity, no matter how less likely the concept of repercussions of being in jail or going through courts or being arrested, no matter how golden that opportunity is, that something transcends your concept of right and wrong and feeling and non-feeling and whatever, and that you still end up, if you follow this concept of guidance, that it would still stop you from doing such things. You probably, in psychology, you probably studied the study of this university, and I agree that study has been somewhat misquoted and exaggerated upon, about questioning students if they could rape somebody without having any way of getting caught.
I haven't encountered that one.
Okay, without getting caught. Now you ask the question.
What a horrible question.
It's a disgusting question. But my brother, honestly, you ask most men today this question, that if you could get away with raping a woman or sleeping, let's say sleeping with a woman against her will, which is still rape, right? But let's not say aggressive with a knife and a gun, but let's say you were able to drug her, whatever, and then you raped her. Let's be honest. Let's be completely honest here. We're all men here, right? You would be probably shocked with the number of men that would probably say, if there was no harm, no repercussion, she would never remember, and nothing would ever come of it. We know that there would be probably quite a few people who would probably say, you know what, yeah, I probably would.
Yeah, there will be.
Yes,
of course.
You agree? Right
there
now.
will be.
However, as a Muslim, as a person who believes in Allah, I know that that is a heinous act in the sight of Allah, and that for it carries a severe punishment. And even if I was, God forbid, of a nature that was inclined to do such an act, this transcending being, this creator, inshallah would stop me, because the fear of the guidance and the fear of the punishment.
So Preston, let me present an idea for this. Is it not more valuable to come to the conclusion that rape is harmful and negative and you don't want to do it from your own thinking rather than prescribed from God? I'd say it's more valuable to come to that conclusion by yourself.
I agree.
Rather than the punishment ward thing.
I agree with that. I will come to that by myself and I would say it's wrong. But then part of me would want to know, where did I get that belief that it's wrong? Was it from my environment, my mother? Was it from a creator?
I can give you an evolutionary one.
Can I give you a point?
Yeah.
So, ultimately, if you take the perspective of an atheistic universe, there is no God. Everything was happenstance, circumstance, coincidence upon coincidences led us to be here. Your consciousness ceases when you die. Ultimately, nothing that happens to you in your life has any ultimate meaning beyond your own perception. Nothing beyond.
You might be able to make your own meaning.
You may, absolutely. So beyond your own personal subjective meaning that you apply, there's no objective meaning to it. It's a very subjective personal point of view. Whether or not you do anything good or bad, actually the terms good and bad does not exist within that scenario.
No, you can build your own values. You can build your own value system.
Absolutely. I would say, not to be sort of horrible, but I'd say this is a type of self-delusion. Because what you're doing is you're saying, because everyone could do that. So the person who, I'll switch the narrative. The person who does do the raping and the murdering, this person who's over here doing that, you could say, well, this is my values. I've come to this conclusion.
Why is it less of a delusion than saying it's from God?
I'll tell you why. Because I can come to let's say Nazi Germany, for example, when all these people are being killed.
Yeah.
They picked the society, however they did, whether it was because of social pressure or however this system came about, ended up killing 6 million Jews plus other people who were not supplying to the Aryan race ideology. If their morality and their ideas of how they act in the world came from a source, let's not say outside of the society. It didn't come. Let's not say God or anything like that. It came from a source that was not the society, and they have to refer to. They would check. When they reached over the bounds. So when they got to the stage of, okay, look, we're going to annihilate these 6 million people. Let's just check this is how we've arrived as a society. We deem them as a threat, they're a fifth column, all of the things that are actually being said about Muslims now, they were saying about the Jews at that time. We're going to annihilate them. We think this is the right, safe thing to do. Let's just check our constitution. Who wrote the constitution? We don't know, but it didn't come from us. The constitution says human beings are equal, you cannot kill an innocent person. Okay, even though we've come to that decision, we can't carry this out because ultimately...
I have a question. Is a believer equal to a non-believer?
As human beings, yes. In the sight of God, no. But that's not our decision to make. And
Does it affect our actions though?
How do you mean?
Well, like if God tells us that a believer is superior to an unbeliever, it's going to affect our actions in the world.
So what God says in the Quran is that the Creator made all human beings into different tribes, made them to come to know each other, and they're all equal on His side, except for those who have God consciousness. They're connected. Now clearly, someone who's following what God wants and someone who isn't, in God's eyes, they're not the same. Now, what we're not in a position to do is, like remember I said to you about the guy who was schizophrenic, who doesn't make some choices. Because he doesn't have the ability to do right or wrong in God's eyes, because he can't make rational choices, he may spiritually be in a better position than I am. Why? Because I have made choices, and some of the choices I've made have not been good. So I can be judged, and he may not be judged. So even if someone is, and he's not a believer as such, he's just following his nature.
Yeah.
Now, so we don't believe, if you are being made because you're a disbeliever to do things that are negative, how can you be judged? So there's no compulsion in your actions. Your will has to be free and your ability to do your actions have to be free. They both go hand in hand.
I think we have to be honest here as well, you know. Even from a human concept, if you have 4 sons, and one is very loving and obedient, grateful and caring, and one of them or 2 of them or the other 3 are disrespectful, they're not grateful, they're not thankful, would you say in your sight, in your eyes, that they would be equal?
I do have an answer to that. Right. I would hope that God's attributes are not similar to man's. Because we judge it, we're like, yeah, I like this son more, I don't like them because they're not nice to me. I hope that God doesn't think anything like me. I hope it's much better than me.
But you see, I think you're flipping the argument the other way, which is that you're attributing something that human beings do and metamorphosizing that to the Creator.
Well, that was your example.
No, I'm saying go the other way round. I'm saying Allah is merciful and Allah is kind, and Allah passes judgment and He judges those, and those that are more devoted and those that are more caring and loving and are more decent, Allah loves them more and they are closer to God than the ones that are not. And Allah has given us that attribute in aspect, in a lesser form, of course, not in the divine form, because we don't join the two, to believe that. But you know, just touching on something that you said earlier, no, not William. It was something that he said that I wanted to touch on, but I've completely forgotten now. Anyway, if it comes to me, I'll touch on that. Yeah.
It's our career time. We want to
I see.
It was a lovely discussion.
appreciate your sincerity.
And forgive me if I came across, I wasn't trying to. There's a couple of little books here about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I'd like you to have those. And if you want a copy of the Quran, I've got a very nice translation. That's also free. If you want to have it, please let me know. I've got more than one, yeah. I'll go and get them.
You know, you said you read about 60 pages. It would be really good because you've got an analytics and
not as many pages as him, but every time I come across something I don't understand, I always come to pay attention.
One of the things the Quran does as a text is it does interact with its reader. Very much.
It's okay, I have my own copy.
It does interact with its reader. It does ask questions of you. It does ask for reflection. So when you're reading the Quran, it's not like food. You start with the beginning there was, and then it's trying to give you principles and things to make you think. So sometimes reading it, you're going to find it's going from one example to another example. It's trying to get you to think about the points that are being made by giving the example. So what I would suggest is, because we're interacting, on the stream, maybe know the perspective of the argument that you're doing. It's interactive with it. Read it and see what it's asking you, and see if from the book you can find things that you think that needs to be explained further or whatever. And then we can come further, because
I need to buy a tafsir to understand.
you can get access to it. You don't need to buy anything. So there's a great local Quran
And there's also some very good English speakers who will give tafsir on Quran as well. So I like listening to Umar Sulaiman. I think he's mashallah very good. I love listening to Professor Tim Winters. Mashallah, he's an amazing scholar, and his explanations are very, very coherent. and he's a professor, so you can imagine his language is just very eloquent. It's very Cambridge, yeah. So Timothy Winters, mashallah, Omar Suleiman, and Imran can recommend some other good people to give tafsir.
But the main thing first, I think, would be to just read the text, because this is the book that's making the claim that it's the good. So if you read through that, then you can engage with that idea and say, actually, you know what? Okay, or you can say, actually, no, I need to ask this question, and then you're making that a systematized approach to making that journey, hopefully with an end in mind. I know William is not making the end in mind.
Oh no, you've got to read the book, man.
You've got to read the book.
Sure, if you're interested in the claims.
Also, read the claims, read what it says, and I think the next major step for a lot of people is, okay, it's very interesting. How can I be shown or provided with evidence to support this claimed miracle of God, and then look at that and study that? Because ultimately, you see, a lot of the things that Brother William discussed, about why this and why that, these are very deep philosophical questions, and they're not just asked within non-Muslim circles. Even within Muslim circles, scholars will discuss these things, But for me as a Muslim, and you can argue subjective, I look at the claim that this is from God. I assess the claim. Am I convinced that it is from God? Is there strong enough reasons and arguments to accept that it is from God? And then, alhamdulillah, whatever it tells me must be true. Of course, the final component would be, is it preserved? Is it from God? Is there strong arguments to support that it is from God? Is it preserved? Then whatever it says to me, no matter what my subjective, very influenced sense of, good and bad, right and wrong, this way or that way, whatever it might be, I would take the back seat and I say, no, it must be true, but let me understand now why it is true. You understand my point? Now, of course, if you don't come to that situation or position of accepting that it is from God, then you may have many questions, and in fact, they may be very intricate in nature, right? But for me, it claims it's from God. Okay, can I prove that it is to me? Is it preserved? Then whatever it tells me has to be true. That's the way I look at it.
The only other thing I would say is if there is this being who's giving you this message, one thing we can do, because we said that there was guidelines in two parts. One was the irshad, which was the information. The second thing is the tawfiq, which comes back to the place. So when you're doing the searching, you say, if you're there, guide me. It's a very simple statement. If you do that sincerely and you're doing the searching,
if you exist, guide me to the truth.
Simple as that. If you're there,
because it's a logical concept, actually. Because you're saying if, number one, you're not saying, you do exist. Okay, God, if you exist, then please guide me to the truth. I'm searching, I'm looking for you. Guide me to the truth. And in fact, I've met many people who are non-Muslims who perform this same prayer. Many of them went into prostration, they put their faces onto the ground, and they said, God, if you exist, guide me to the truth. And alhamdulillah, they were guided.
Preston, Riza, lovely to meet you again.
Nice to meet you.
See you soon. William?
Always a pleasure.
Nice conversation.
Always a pleasure. William, nice.
See you later. Thanks, guys.
See you next time.
You start. No, you start. Okay.
Yeah. don't take over everything from your meddling.
Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
There are multiple ways of taking interpretation.
So I'm saying, I choose, okay, it's up to you, it's fine, I don't mind if Christians or anybody else chooses to read it and interpret it as visual. I'm simply saying, I interpret it metaphysically or metaphorically, right? Meaning that it was a vision that was taking place.